awareness campaign so that your younger people who are now more interested in causes and less in sort of membership, as Patrick stated, that they sort of feel like they belong to something that's bigger than themselves. And so we're doing a lot more there by trying to build more awareness and doing a full-on campaign as necessary.
See, I love that. And I actually want to hear a little bit more about that too, because, my history way back in the day, I worked with a couple of different associations where my responsibility was to communicate to the student members, to build student chapters. We had scholarships. We had all kinds of fantastic networking opportunities where they could meet. I mean, I'm talking about the best minds in science that had to do with, physicists who were winning huge awards and wonderful opportunities. And yet getting that awareness out there, if you didn't have faculty at a university somewhere, if you didn't have, people planted, organizations planted to share your information, to share that awareness, nobody found out, right? And there were times when we had scholarships that we didn't have enough people applying for them, giving money away, giving things away, and you couldn't get enough applicants. And I think that it was a remarkable loss of opportunity. But the fact is that opportunity is there, and there are people who want that. But it's spreading that awareness. It's getting that knowledge out. So, that's why I think that this is such a compelling problem. I see the skills gap as you can see this with associations all across the board. I saw it when I was working with a scientific professional association, and I hear the same things from association professionals today. So, when you're going about trying to increase that awareness and address that, what are some things that you've been trying so far? What's been actually getting you a little bit of traction?
I think the biggest thing to consider, forgive the vernacular, is that if one builds it doesn't mean people will come. I think our association sphere and our not-for-profit, honestly, the sector has sort of assumed that for many, many years. And so I think, at least in our association's case, we're thinking about new ways to go where those young people are. And what better way to do that than empower our members to do that, number one. So developing resources and tools, partnering with organizations like Heather's, in fact, who will be able to reach the people where they are, as opposed to us trying to go out and find them. And so, number one, we're finding some recent success by reaching out to other nonprofits or other trade associations that represent entire groups of people that we ourselves would love to bring in as customers, so to speak. So that would be something I would certainly urge other associations to do, is reach out to partner organizations or become partners with organizations that already have all that stuff on the plate for themselves. So they'll do the work for you, essentially.
Yeah, I love the idea of partnership. You see that working. I mean, so often nothing that we do can just exist in its own little bubble. So, how do you feel about that? What are you seeing that is working or maybe not working, Patrick?
So in our field, we're still really working within kind of the traditional channels, partnering with universities that have an aviation program to expose them to membership, for one, and also to expose them to our events. We host an enormous trade show either annually in Las Vegas or in Orlando, and we work with aviation schools from the high school to the college level to bring as many students as they can to the last day of our events. And to see some of these young folks walk around our show floor and to understand the depth of opportunity that's available to them is pretty inspiring. And then once you have them in the door, to involve them in a program that is relevant to them. So not so much for the high school student, but for someone out of college, we've started a young professionals program that provides networking and is beginning to provide a mentor and mentee relationship with someone in our field. And I know that those all sound like very traditional paths of awareness and engagement within an industry, but it's something that we haven't really had a whole lot of experience.
It's interesting because I was looking at, I was actually just recently in a conversation just earlier today where I was talking a little bit about this issue with trying to reach out to prospective student members and increasing student membership and some of the things that worked and didn't work. And it's funny, when I look back, I think about some of the dramatic impact that sort of taking a more customized individual approach to developing opportunities, it had this huge impact for those individuals who were a part of it. And the problem was what? Right? It doesn't scale, but if you take on this, sort of hand holding, creating these customized experiences, it can have an amazing effect. Heather, can you talk a little bit about what Q Career is doing, where you've seen, the ability to maybe, grow these opportunities and so that it does scale, and maybe address the idea of creating a customized approach too?
Sure. So for us, because we're a dual marketplace, right? So we're trying to attract both the associations and the students. So we've been partnering with companies that already have inroads at colleges, community colleges, and high school. So that way we don't have to reinvent the wheel, and then we'll slowly start branding ourselves to students. And then we have student interns and acting as campus ambassadors. And, I think, as far as scale, you just always really have to get creative. We attend so many different events, and we're close to San Diego, obviously. So when I went to a Cal SAE event down in San Diego, there was a lot of nonprofits there dealing with Navy pilots, actually. So these Navy pilots get out, they've, served their time. They kind of, can retire at 45, some of them, depending on what time, when they went in. And then it's kind of like, wow, what do I do with my life now? Really? Right. And where do I fit in? But for something like maybe business aviation, partnering with different, veterans groups, because there are probably a bunch of pilots out there that, you wouldn't think would need jobs, but, they kind of get out of their service. They've been doing something for so long and they have to go that route. And then we were at the Milken Institute, and it was a diversity summit talking basically about diversity in the workforce. But a executive from Santa Monica College was on the panel, and he was talking about, companies are now approaching them. And Santa Monica College, just so you know, it's a 2-year school, but it's a huge feeder school into the UCLA system. So UCLA accepts all the Santa Monica credits. It's a really nice transition. So you could pay for 2 years, at Santa Monica College, and then you could transfer into the, the UC system most of the time. And Amazon came to Santa Monica College, and Amazon is actually teaching a cloud computing class at Santa Monica College. And sometimes it's also getting businesses over the hump of always putting on the resume, we need 4-year degrees, right? Because here's a perfect example of kids that, are being trained just in cloud computing and are getting a certificate in that basically Amazon set up the entire program. So they actually obviously know how to work with Amazon products. But some employers, though, too, still get hung up on you must have a 4-year degree, and I think that really needs to be looked at, too, because there are kids that have the experience and the certificates and the knowledge, but it's not a 4-year degree. So I think, too, there's, we have to also go back and relook at, what we're really asking for sometimes.
It is such an interesting time for work. It's so interesting because, while we're talking about the skills gap, we're also facing the AI questions of, what jobs are going to remain for those workers that we have out there right now. And something you were talking about, all of these people they're going through, they're getting trained for a certain thing. And are they just going to not work when they turn 45 or whatever? A lot of us are looking at, changing careers, maybe, talking about, it's not even looking for those students who have never gotten into the workforce, but it's talking about, and pretty soon when we're having to retrain and refocus and pivot in our own lives and move into a new career. So let's talk a little bit about that. How are, and I want to go to Jonathan and Patrick I called you Jonathan, Joseph and Patrick, and talk a little bit about that. Are you guys thinking about that when you look at skills gap? Are you thinking about the AI question or retraining people as they change in their careers?
Well, I can kick off a little bit. In our industry, one of the elements that is changing in technology is unmanned. And what does the unmanned aviation bring to our trade and our industry? And how do things change? Because people generally think of business aviation as a corporate jet flying executives different places, but business aviation spans a lot of different industries. There are oil and gas pipeline companies that have used aviation to inspect their lines, power companies that do the same, air ambulance services, local municipalities that use helicopters throughout the day. And so as technology changes and the skills change, how do we bring that into the fold? Because today, MBA has existed for 70 years without unmanned aviation being a component. So how do you begin to offer benefits and services that meet that need? Because someone will fill that gap. As technology improves and new technologies enter into the workforce, and maybe there aren't as many pilots in a cockpit of an aircraft, or as many mechanics working on an airplane, because the airplane is now it's 5 pounds and it's almost disposable if something breaks on it. How does that change our industry? So yes, it's a big issue that we are confronting by learning about the technologies that exist, offering services that.
I love this because let me tell you, we have a great comment over here on this side. Those of you who are watching through Facebook Live or Periscope, or if you're watching on YouTube Live, maybe you're listening to this later. One of the great benefits of doing this chat every week and doing it on Crowdcast is that we have some wonderful comments that come in. People are able to participate through the Crowdcast platform live. And one of the questions that we got earlier came from Bob. I'm not going to say his whole name. I'm going to try to get him to jump on and maybe talk with us a little bit. He writes about the impact of automation on human employment. And he talked about the 4 essential skills to maintain, being the ability for self-directed learning, collaboration techniques, analysis, and creativity. So Bob Resselman, Bob, let me go ahead and invite you on.
While Bob's trying to figure out how to do that a little bit too, I'll talk about the AI stuff. Yeah. That's why we started looking at Q Career as a lifelong learning platform, because whether you want to or not, the majority of us are going to have to pivot, in our careers because of AI. And that's scary for a lot of people, because what if someone wasn't good at school, right? Or purposely didn't go to a 4-year college because that school wasn't their thing. And now we're saying like, oh, you're going to have to, get retrained in X, Y, and Z. So I think that's where associations really play such a huge part, because they're made up of employees and employers. They see this stuff coming down the pike and they can kind of start to get their members a little bit more comfortable with it and start getting them thinking about, hey, like we're going to start offering like these courses or these badges next. And, you know, so, and easing them into it, I think too, there's a psychological component to it as well.
I love that.